Morning, everyone. Welcome to Handing the Shame Back, a channel dedicated to survivors of child sexual abuse here in New Zealand and out across the world. I'm Gloria Masters. I'm your host, and it's my pleasure to welcome you back on board. So, a couple of admin things before I introduce our fabulous guest today. Number one, we do have on the channel a subscribe button and a bell. And the reason I'm asking you, please to click on those is because the more survivors we can help, the better. There's many of us out there. So thank you for that. Secondly, if you feel at all triggered watching this, please stop. Go to the show notes below where you will be directed for help, support and guidance. Thank you. In the meantime, here we are. We have the lovely Kalpa Gupta. She's with us today, and she is also a survivor of child sexual abuse. Her work is around helping other survivors of child sexual abuse to emerge through. And she used to be a financial services director for publicly traded companies globally. So she's very wise and brings a great deal of experience and intellectual capacity with her to this show. And also, because there's always more with these fabulous survivors, she's a CEO of Connect, which helps people transform their lives by rebuilding the relationship they have with themselves. So welcome to you, Kalpa.
Thank you, Gloria. Hi, everyone. My name is Kalpa Gupta, and what an honor and privilege to be here in the wise company of Gloria, you today.
Hey, no, I'm always going to take the win. Thank you. So, Kalpa, I guess, as with all guests on the show, let's start at the beginning. Clearly, you're a survivor. Are you able to give us just whatever you're comfortable with around kind of what you went through as a child?
Sure. So in my case, I was sexually abused from the early childhood, which is pretty much my early memories, perhaps started somewhere around 3-4 years old, up until early adulthood, like early 20, and over a number of periods by multiple different people. Some in my family, somebody who taught me, a neighbor, like extended in some incest relations. So, and I honestly, when I left home at the age of 16 to study in a different city, and then I moved to the US about 16 years ago, I thought that trauma was a thing of my past, right? It happened something like really ahead, and I moved on. I am an achiever. I have so many good people in my life. I'm blessed to have loving parents and, a very loving family beyond what happened. And it's really in my mid-30s, Gloria, that I realized the effect and fully the childhood sexual abuse that has on our brain's wiring, our physical health, and just emotionally how we are wired.
Yeah. It certainly has a massive impact. And just for our audience sake, Kalpa, did this happen in your country of origin? So whereabouts did all this take place?
Yeah, so this took place. I grew up in the eastern part of India in a rural mining town, very small community. I lived in a multi-generational household. Yeah, so that's where it took place. And then also as I moved through, some of the abuse happened elsewhere as well with somebody I knew. And I was terrified. Honestly, I think I tried to, when this happens, so yeah, so that's the context in which it happened. And in that context, you don't know, you're confused, right? Because these are the people you know day in and out, and you trust at some level, and you are almost afraid to share anything with anyone. And I think I should add some more context. 2 of the other friends that I knew they were also abused. Some things happened with the same perpetrators in front of my eyes. So the children over there, like, I think we just learned how to navigate around. We knew who the people are, so we would save other younger kids around. So as we grew up, right, not to have them around the same perpetrators. But I think it just the environment that we were in, as well as the lack of the shame and around sexuality, sex education, what is private, how you take care of yourself, like as a children. These were not that, this is, I'm talking like 80s and, growing up in the 80s in India. But I don't think that's unique to India, right? I've lived in US, and we are talking to you, and I think this is the silent endemic, right? Which we don't talk about. We don't talk about a lot, right? And so it's an important topic for us to kind of just talk about, because that trauma really, I believe that trauma, if 1 in 3 adults, I think the New Zealand numbers that you have, and in US, the numbers that I've seen, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys are sexually abused before they turn 18. By any conservative estimates, I think roughly a world's 1/4 of population is sexually abused, which means we have abused and abusers both, right? So we are living in this world which is designed a lot by trauma. And I think collectively we are growing up in that environment. There's a lot of good that's happening, but there's also that underlying trauma.
Yeah. And look, you've raised some really interesting things. So if you're okay, I'd like to do a little bit of a dive in. So one is trust, and you mentioned trust as being almost impossible, because who do you trust? And in an environment where sexual abuse seems to be where you grew up, to the point where you were protecting younger children, A, that's a load no child should carry, but B, you see how complicit adults were around those abusers for it to have continued. So there seems to have been, and there seems to be today, wondering aloud with you, Kalpa, permission for this. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the trust and the permission is a very interesting thing. So I grew up in a society where you touch elders' feet, right? And I'm digressing here a little bit, just to get to that point that nobody asked for that permission, right? Nobody taught us like what is okay or what is not okay. We had to navigate. I had to navigate and figure that out for myself. And I feel that when I realized that I have a choice, for me, the choices were get education and get out of here, right? I thought that my house or neighborhood or my place wasn't safe, because day in and out, you're running into these people and you don't know who to tell. And then I realized that I hold that permission and the power that we have very sacred to myself, right? I don't know how it came, Gloria, but at some point I think I knew I had a choice, right? And I think my trauma has taught me also to be resilient and like being very, very vocal about asking others for help and asking for and also really being very, very, very cognizant of like where I'm giving permission knowingly, where I'm not giving permission knowingly, right? And then does that make sense?
Yeah, and I guess too, when you think about it, when you have elders and culturally, you're worshipping at their feet pretty much. I imagine that's a bit of a demigod status. And so they, perhaps the ones who are very unwell and are pedophiles, think they then have permission to do whatever they like. I'm more concerned with the enablers around them, who are the adults who don't abuse, but who are aware of that. And that concerns me because it still goes on today.
Yeah. So fortunately, in my case now, right, I have shared all that story like in my 40s with my family, pretty much my immediate family, my parents, and everybody believed, right? I do know people in cases where people share and they are not trusted, and that's heartbreaking, right?
Yes.
That's really heartbreaking. In my case, and I have the permission to share, my mom is also a survivor, and she hadn't shared her story until I came forward, like in the last year or so.
Yeah.
So yes, there are people that are enabling, but the context I should add in that, growing up in that family, was my parents, they were loving and kind, and they were doing all the right things. And they were so busy just making their life work. Like my care was really outsourced to pretty much the rest of the family, right? And my mom and my brother probably, we are 2 years apart. She didn't, and my mom still till date regrets that I didn't spend as much time. I don't know how you grew up. And I was very aloof. So yes, you can say the patriarchy in terms of how the women's role and where they are, I think that enable, and also the patriarchy in terms of like your father figures are supposed to earn a living and, and all, but nobody was watching. They missed a few things. Right? So yeah, I carried a lot of anger for that, right? I remember when my son was born and they were there with me, I wouldn't let anybody hold my child. I just couldn't. And I didn't know, I think my path to motherhood triggered me in so many ways, Gloria. I can't even explain. That's whole nother area we could dive into. So that was the context, so yes, they nobody asked for my permission, but they enable the way the family structures are set up, the roles, and then the way we don't teach kids age appropriate things that this perpetuates.
Yeah, and look, no disrespect to your beautiful parents. I'm not necessarily referring to them as enabling anything. I'm meaning the structure, societal structure around the enablers. And, I think you're really talking about education. So I just want to come back now to anger, because I think anger's big. We often hear, don't we, that women are emotional and men are logical. And to you gorgeous male survivors listening, this is not a dig at you. I just need to be really clear about this. Women are seen as emotional because we tend to cry when we get overwhelmed or even feel angry. Tears will come. For male survivors out there, they'll get angry, and that could be a physical retaliation or voices raised. For whatever reason, there's a saying out there that women are emotional and men are logical. And I just think in the survivor world, we need to explode this myth. Anger is an emotion. Yes. If you get angry, guys or women, beautiful survivors, I don't care what sex you are, you're still a beautiful survivor. If you get angry, that is an emotional response. And I think, Kalpa, we need to explode this myth, because we are, in the eyes of all of us, we're equal. We're not comparing. There is no place for that in our survivor world. We need to stand together and we need to support. So that's my little view on anger. But Kalpa, you talk about anger, so I guess I'm interested. How have you been able to express that? Or once you recognize that, how did that emerge for you?
If one advice that I would give, this is so important that you're talking about emotions and anger, is all emotions are energy in motion, right?
Yes.
So you've got to feel it and let it go and understand what is underneath that, right? Growing up, I was told conflict is bad. And when you would raise your voice about some things, how my mom is treated, or how, any other injustices around things, right? Oh, we don't do this. I got this, right? So you the anger, for the longest time in my life, like I would cry, I would get very emotional. At workplaces, I've got that feedback, oh, you're very emotional. I'm like, yes, I own all my emotions, right? I'm passionate. It's not good or bad. It's an energy in motion that you're feeling, and there's an underlying cause. So I am proud that I am a complete human being. I own all of my anger. I own all of my sadness. I feel my joy. And I channel my anger. These days, I've learned that particularly in the last year or two, to really express my anger. And sometimes it means I just need to take a break in the middle of an argument, just step away, walk away, but then come back and actually have the conversation within a certain time of what is it about the situation that I didn't feel. And usually it's one of the three. I didn't feel seen, I didn't feel heard, and I didn't feel like validated. And usually it's that little girl, right? Somehow the way I felt in those first few years of my life, somehow that child shows up, right? And I've learned to kind of manage that well, like experience it fully, and then go to the underneath and express. So for the survivors out there, you are, depending on whether you're younger or in a certain age, if you're still angry, there's a reason. There's a reason to get underneath that, and it's okay to be angry at it, because you are not the one who made any mistakes. It was not your fault. So give yourself permission to feel that fully and experience.
You've just, it's amazing. I'm so, thrilled that you're speaking like this, Kalpa, because not being heard, not being seen, not being validated is kind of a core mantra, I guess, for all of our beautiful audience watching out there. We just didn't. And I think as children, when the most sacred part of you, the beautiful soul part, that's deeply impacted actually when someone destroys it by abusing us, is incredible. We're not seen, we're not validated, we're not heard, and we carry it through, don't we, on our shoulders. So for audience out there, as Kalpa and I speaking, we are handing the shame back, and I encourage you to find whatever way works for you, because this never belonged to us. But I want to raise another point. You talked about anger and how you expressed it and how you felt it, and I'm so thrilled you did, because one of the things we do know is that anger is as healthy an emotion as happiness or sadness or joy. And here's a little known fact, everyone. Anger is also a cover for sadness. Yeah. So, for men and women out there, it's a cover for sadness. If we're angry, we're covering something, and it just may not have emerged in our conscious mind or be ready to be dealt with. So I guess, Kalpa, just looking at what you are working with and the ways that you have managed to deal with, I guess, and manage what happened to you. Is there anything or two or three things in particular you found were useful for you to manage what happened? How have you survived this?
Absolutely. And I wish I had some of these things, very earlier in my life, right? Yes. We all do. But like, divine timing, you're listening at the right place at the right time. So one, forgiveness. And this may sound maybe very, very extreme for some people, or maybe difficult for you, but by forgiveness, I mean write down a letter vent all your emotions, what you felt as a child. Don't censor yourself, right? Whether it's a post-it note or whether it's a letter, write a letter to your abusers, and one or more or whatever, and just pour that out. You don't have to send the letter, you don't have to confront, but just writing and expressing what you felt, that itself provides a lot of release, right? And I read a book by Desmond Tutu, the Book of Forgiving, which was around my mid to late 30s, when I really, in an executive coaching session, is where I realized that I was carrying my sexual abuse trauma, and which is why the power dynamics at work was so like triggering for me, right? Not being seen, heard, and validated. So the forgiveness of all kinds of, I made a list of all the things, all the people I needed to forgive, and that just created that space for me to start the healing journey. So that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, obviously, like, go through therapy. And I understand it can be expensive in different parts of the world, but there are many tools. So whatever you can find to go do therapy, I highly encourage. I've spent probably thousands of dollars, many months and year like in therapy. And I use that as my more ongoing like mental health check. I think we need that. And number three, no matter how low point you are in your life, you can make a difference. Find somebody, a purpose, or maybe it's another child that is being abused, or another friend, or another colleague, or somebody or maybe an organization. Service and acknowledging also what is good in your life can instantly like shift you to that space where then you can build upon. So these are the three fundamental tools that I would give. And I'm an avid reader, so I can share some more resources later.
Well, and we'll put them in the links too at the bottom with all your, but I love what you're saying. And again, there's so much coming from you, which is so exciting for us, our listeners as well. When you talk about forgiveness, it's so powerful. And I know that for some of our survivors, it feels almost impossible. But here's the thing, and it took me years to realize, and then I got there. Forgiving the abuser or perpetrators is nothing to do with them. It's everything to do with us. And so by forgiving them, I was able then to move on with my life, because they did not know that I was holding on to anything because I had no relationship with them. So the point is this: forgiveness is actually about you as a beautiful survivor. It's nothing to do with the people that hurt you and abused you. So know that, because I think that's really powerful. And don't we owe it to ourselves to actually give ourselves the best option there is out there? So Kalpa, I love that. And I love, as Kalpa said, that writing that letter is a really powerful way of doing it and releasing it. I think therapy is incredible, certainly helped me. And I love your acts of service, because Kalpa, tell us a little bit about some of the acts of service that you provided others that helped maybe to lift you or shift you out of your own sense of despair. Are you able to share any of those with us?
Oh, you mean any of the three things that I shared, how each of those helped me?
No, the service that you provided others. So you became other focused, and the secondary gain was that it made you feel so much better. So can you give us an example of how that happened?
Yeah, so I around the time I started volunteering for two organizations at the time, one more around the family caregivers, Arizona Caregivers. I was living in Arizona then, Arizona Caregivers Coalition, which provides family caregivers, support. And then the second one, which is really more aligned with the mission for me, was being a court-appointed special advocate. So court-appointed special advocates are in the US, kids that are in the foster care system who've been separated because of familial, abuse. It could be physical abuse, sexual abuse, or any kind of other reasons. Maybe their parents were incarcerated. So they are in foster care system. So there are courts basically then allow each child to have like a CASA, which basically is ears to the child and represents them in the court from a writing a report to the judge, right? So I became involved with an agency called Voices, which provided training and support to the CASAs. At the time, I wasn't fully involved in, I didn't have enough bandwidth or commitment to be a full-time CASA. So I got involved in training so that I could learn and I could help. And I learned a ton in serving. I thought I'm going to serve the CASAs, but I think I took away so many things around adverse childhood effects and, the impact of that on brain's development. And that actually set the path for the healing journey that I'm on, right? So you think that volunteering and giving is, oh, you have more, but I think you receive many folds, right? And so that was one agency. And then eventually I ended up becoming a CASA. I'm a CASA now, like at least in Arizona. And then as I have moved here in Texas, I think I'm going to find ways to get involved. So service is like number one for me, really in giving back to the cause.
It's so beautiful. And isn't it interesting? The whole motive, the objective was actually to help others, and look what you have achieved, and it set you off on your own journey. That's beautiful. So tell us, Kalpa, tell us about the work that you're currently doing, your CEO role.
Yes, it's interesting you asked me. So I created this company when I left a company after nearly a decade. And I was wondering, like doing soul searching, like what's next for Kalpa? And I was really disconnected with me. So I was seeking connection with self. So that led to the name of Connext, right? So there's connection and there's what's next for Kate, right? So that was the point. And then I took another role with another, in the financial fintech space. And the company did a restructuring early last year, and then I lost the job along with many others. And honestly, I knew even before that I was becoming an entrepreneur, right? So right now what I do, I transform people's relationship with self. And my purpose is to help sexually abused children and women claim their power, use their voice, live with joy, and create a kinder world. So 3 things that our company does is one, given my fintech and all of that experience in the past, I advise other small to mid-market companies that serve other companies, either raising capital or providing services to other financial services companies. So more as a consultant and advisor. The second thing, I also have a lot of in-kind partnerships around coaching other women in mid-career in tech and product. And I'm increasingly hearing that should be another service line for my business. I'm very early on in that line. And the third one, which is really my purpose, which is basically creating spaces like masterminds for executives and business leaders who may be outwardly very successful. In the words of Alice Miller, who's the author for the drama of the Gifted Child book, we hide behind our achievements. So creating spaces for other executives who may be sexually abused to come together and help them share their stories. Yeah. So we provide like accountability groups as well as coaching to be able to share their stories, because I think there is really power in sharing their stories, like people like you and I who've overcome that shame, blame, and guilt, taken up our power, right? And being responsible to break that cycle of intergenerational trauma. So my mission with this company, my mission really with this endeavor is impact 100 million lives in 10 years. Wow. Even if we can impact like 1% of the humanity and raise that consciousness, I think we'll be living in a different world like in 10 years from now.
Wow, that's amazing. And I guess what you must see in the gains that these people make must be just reward in itself.
Yes, I'm very early on in that chapter, in that journey, Gloria, and I must say that it's people like you and others that are coming in the way that you know. And then every morning when I wake up and I get some message, oh my goodness, what you wrote in that post, that is exactly how I feel as a new mom, or oh, you know, you shared that and I can relate to your experience, and then I realized that this is serious. Kalpa, there is no going back. This is why you're here. And this is why it matters that you share the stories, because there's such deep shame. And shame is one of the lowest vibrations, right? So it's become my mission to how do I eradicate that and shift them to really feeling that their inner child is finally seen, and forget about the rest of the world. How do you accept yourself fully?
Yeah.
And for me, it's been a process. It's a three-step process, right?
Yeah.
It is how are you basically healing yourself? Like reframing that story as an adult survivor. And you can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. We are social beings, right? How do you reframe that story? The second thing is, how do you create that safe tribe and community who can hold you when you fall apart? And then how do you move to that next level where you can even help others, right? And so yes, this is what keeps me, keeps me motivated in the morning. And then when I go to bed at night, I'm deeply satisfied that I've done my best for that day.
You're amazing, and very grateful you're in the world doing what you're doing. When you talk about shame, and this is partly why this channel is called Handing the Shame Back. To me, my humble opinion, this all began in secrecy. The silence was ensured either through threats or you made me do it, or some form of manipulation against loved ones or damage to ourselves. And then the shame keeps us quiet, and the shame takes the gold, in my opinion, because it's what kept us and keeps us quiet, silent, buried, hidden, isolated, different, unable to speak. It renders us incapacitated. And I guess, for me, we don't need to do what Kalpa's doing, beautiful audience. You don't need to do what I'm doing, but in your own way. Now, whether that's through writing something out, whether it's through doing some art, whether it's through running a marathon and training for that, it doesn't matter how you do it, but if in some way, shape or form, you can start to tell your story even to yourself, you release that shame. And what are we about? Handing the shame back. It never belonged to us. It never belonged to us. And Kalpa, it's so powerful. I've always called this a silent endemic because no one wants to know and no one wants to speak of it. But as you and I both know, it doesn't mean it's not happening out there or that it didn't. So our voices need to be heard. The silence is deafening and it echoes. So, yeah. Kalpa, what else would you like to share with our fabulous audience out there?
Yeah, as you were talking, Gloria, this vision came to me. I think this message needs to be heard, right? Which is, I am the mother of an 8-year-old boy, right? So when he was born, and I pretty much was re-traumatized from the perspective. Every time I would look at him, I'm like, how could somebody do that to a child? If something were to happen to him, would it be his fault? No way on earth. Right. So, and I think that is when I was like, okay, it is not my mistake. It was not my fault. It wasn't my shame to keep. So I think that was the time. I think that, and then I think there are two powerful exercises that I did, which just have put me on this path. Like, I'm a self-development like geek, right? But these two questions were like, okay, if I were to die tomorrow, what would be my regret, right? And this was not telling my story, because I wouldn't know that people around my son that are there, do they know, which people are safe, which are not, or to be aware, right? And then that was really one of the regrets that came out that I would have, and I didn't want to have that regret, right? And the second fear I had as I was telling the story was like, okay, would my family accept me? Would I have loss of income? Would I have loss of business? But I'll tell you, like, I as I was going public and I was sharing with other people, I've been surprised by my business partners, my friends, my family, everybody, like how they have held the space. I've even gone and spoken to my abusers. And when I did that, I have all the compassion for them in the world. Some of them are no more, but the ones that are alive, when I spoke to them, I could see them as the little child who were scared, that I actually went and I had the conversation, right? I forgive them, I wish them well, and I've taken the power back. So Gloria, the only thing that I would say to your audience is, it's not about you. When you if you have the privilege to share, it's not about you. Please do share if you have that opportunity. It is, and know that this is always your choice, who you tell, how you share. The reason Gloria and I and people like us are coming and here is we are providing that permission that we accept you fully with everything that has happened, right? So hope these these words like help you.
And I love it and I just want to clarify in case audience get confused, when Kalpa's saying it's not about you, what she means by that is, of course it happened to you, so it's all about you, but actually the shame is not about you. The forgiveness and the being able to move on is it's actually about your perpetrators, guys. So tell us, when you saw the abusers, Kalpa, if you're comfortable, how was that for you? What was that experience like? Did they admit what they did? Like, tell us a bit. Be grateful to know.
Yeah, so there are two people that I spoke. The first one, they basically said, hey, I've changed a lot. They were literally running away. I met them at a social gathering, right? And they said they have changed away. I said, hey, it does not matter. Like, that thing has no power in me. And I hope you've changed, because now everybody knows, right? And I forgive you. And then they were gone after that. I haven't seen them. The other person also, when I was reaching out to them, they said they've been meaning to reach out to me for a number of years, because they've been on their own spiritual path of, seeking forgiveness. And they just didn't want to traumatize me, so they never reached out, right? And everybody has their reasons, or, but for me, it wasn't about it. It was for me, I needed that conversation for closure. So in my case, I've done multiple rounds of forgiveness, like, really writing a letters. And in those two cases, I had such an energy, like, exchange, that I needed that closure. So yeah. I did that for myself. Yeah.
And that's amazing. And so no one denied. No one denied. Yeah. It's quite powerful, but it just brings me back to something you said earlier, and it needs to be addressed. I'm so grateful that you were believed and supported by your family and your loved ones. For a lot of our audience out there, they're not believed. No one wants to know. We're labelled things like deluded and liars and black sheep of the family. So for some of us, a lot of us, that's been our experience. What's beautiful, Kalpa, is hearing that you were, because it does show us, doesn't it, that there's possibility out there, should we ever encounter it among other people, that there are good people out there who do believe. And yeah, I know our survivor community, one of our mantras actually is, I see you, I stand beside you, I believe you. Because sometimes there's no other avenue but through a survivor community.
Yeah, and I do want to double down on one point you mentioned,
Yeah.
Gloria, is the first step. Sometimes the easiest step is sometimes to tell a stranger or somebody else you trust, because the abuse sometimes happens particularly in childhood sexual abuse. 90% of the time, the child knows the perpetrator. They are somebody they trust, right? So there's so much fear, and sometimes even as an adult survivor, you're fearful that you will break down the family dynamics. You'll bring additional shame by people knowing about it, or what would be the impact on your dad or mom or a sibling, or when they know that this happened, or or maybe a caregiver abused. So sometimes it's easy to just find that release with somebody else you trust, right? And I have found in my case that was the case. That's how I started like sharing. So I wanted to clarify that.
That's actually a really good point. Sometimes it can be safer if they're not known to us. I suppose the other thing is, what emotion were you feeling as you confronted or had the conversation with your abusers? How were you feeling? What was happening?
It's interesting, so by then, I have done a lot of therapy, a lot of work on me, sharing the story with a very close group of people. And and in fact, one case is I had come out of a 1 week retreat, like a breathwork retreat. So my trauma at the cellular level that was stored all these years was like I had transformed to a different being than I was even a few weeks prior to that. And I remember making the phone call somewhere towards the late end of that week. So I was at a very different space mentally, physically, like spiritually, right, to be able to have that conversation. And I was prepared to hold the space no matter what the response was going to be. Right? So so that was the mental state that in my case I was in when I had those conversations.
Well, it's really powerful, and your courage is incredible, and it's just such an honour to have you here, Kalpa. As we're moving to close, is there any other words of wisdom from you over in Texas before I close out?
Yes, I think we've dug into so many different areas. I want you all, the audience, to know, those survivors who are listening, you are not alone, and it's not your fault. You are a beautiful being. You are here to enjoy life. Rest of your life, your past doesn't define you. You are a beautiful soul. Claim your power. You're meant to experience life, and every breath that you have here, right? So with that thought, if any of you want to be in touch or reach out, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I try and do as much as I can to help and create the space.
And are you able to share with us? I will put it all in the show notes, audience, but Kalpa, are you able to share with us your website, please, so people can go there and find you?
Yes, so my website is work in progress as we speak. So you can find me on LinkedIn with my name, Kalpa Gupta, and we'll put it in the show notes. It's KALPASHREE Gupta in LinkedIn. You'll find me that way. And then if you find me on that and sign up for my newsletter, as soon as I have my website up and running, you'll find me there as well.
Oh, that's so fabulous. Hey, thank you so much. And audience, I know you've got many things out of this, and I guess some really wonderful takeaways, or the two that there are so many, but two I can think of are, the forgiveness piece. I think that was really powerful what Kalpa shared with that. And also one of her three options that she kind of started to work with was including an active service, actually. So just looking out for other people, becoming other focused, and the rewards that she felt through that. So many thanks to you, Kalpa. I'm just going to close out with our fabulous survivor audience. So survivors, wow, you're welcome. Great to have Kalpa with us, and just want to say, if you like the type of interviews I'm running, if you're enjoying the blogs, if you're enjoying some of the media spotlights I include, please feel free to go to the donate button on the website, gloriamasters.com, and help me continue the work. I am 100% self-funded, so any little bits and pieces help me. In the meantime, love and light to all of you. It is such a privilege and a pleasure to stand alongside such incredible human beings. You are believed. I stand beside you. I see you. Take care of your wonderful selves till next week.